Taking a look at birth order. Erica Quednow is digging deeper into that for us this morning. And Erica, you've got some fun facts about siblings for us now.
Yes, Cynthia, these are from nursingschools.net. And the first we heard a little bit earlier in the show, kids spend more time with their siblings than their friends, parents, teachers, or even alone. Even if they don't get along, brothers and sisters are still choosing to spend about 33% of their free time together. Also true, siblings fight a lot. One researcher found brothers and sisters between 3 and 7 engage in conflict 3.5 times an hour. Younger kids have fights about every 10 minutes. And this may be surprising. Nursingschools.net says 65% of moms and 70% of dads show a preference for one sibling over another. And while most parents will deny having a favorite child, studies show the kids are aware of it and that they'll use it to their advantage. But it can be damaging in the long run to their self-esteem and confidence. Cynthia.
All right, interesting stuff, Erica. Thanks. And researchers at the U of I are finding out what the science behind the birth order says. We are joined this morning by Brent Roberts, a professor of psychology at the U of I. And you guys just did a really big study concerning birth orders. So let's talk a little bit about what prompted your team to dig into this and what kind of questions were you hoping to answer?
Well, we do personality research to begin with, but we've mostly focused on personality in adulthood. We like to know what it is, why it's important, and how it develops. And one of the traits we focus on primarily is conscientiousness, which is your ability to keep things in order and to meet responsibilities and delay gratification and the like. And one of the interesting questions is, how do you get to adulthood with that trait in your possession? And so we hadn't actually started thinking about that until the last few years. And when you do start thinking about how you get to be conscientious, one of the first answers that people come up with primarily is birth order. That firstborns are always more conscientious than latter-borns, and so this led to some curiosity about birth order and whether it would be related to conscientiousness and personality writ large. So what the other personality traits, how they would be related to your personality too, or how they would be related to birth order too. So.
And so what do you mean by being someone who's conscientious?
So we define it as being responsible, planful, organized, being able to delay gratification and to work hard. And so it's an important trait when it comes to a lot of different outcomes in adulthood. So it's related to whether you do better in work, in school, in relationships, your health and the like.
Right.
And so it became an area of focus of ours about 10 or 15 years ago, and we've been studying it ever since.
And what about the scope of this study? How does it relate to other studies? And I'm sure there have been many about birth order and how it affects people's personalities.
There have been many studies, hundreds of them, to be honest with you. This is by far the largest one that's ever been done when it comes to birth order and personality in particular.
Okay.
And so it was a data set that fell into our laps a few years ago with 380,000 U.S. citizens who were assessed back in 1960.
Okay.
And it's a representative sample of the U.S. high school population at that stage, so it's a really nice sample. They had a very nice measure of personality, which had most of the personality traits covered, and then they had some information about birth order, and then they had a lot of background information about the students themselves, where they were from, what their family was like, whether they had brothers and sisters, obviously, what their socioeconomic status was, and intelligence, too. So it was a really good data set for examining the issue.
Now, was this like randomly chosen people, or how were these people identified?
So they were selected as a representative sample of the U.S. high school population at that stage.
Okay. Any downsides to this study and the selection process and who was used for it?
Downsides, no. I think in terms of who was selected, the sample is pretty much ideal. There's some aspects to it that could have been better. If they did something other than self-reports, that would have been nice.
Okay.
So if they had brothers and sisters identified, so you could actually look at brothers and sisters within the same family, that would have been even better. In this case, we had basically students and where they were in their family structure and their self-reports of their personality.
And so why is this something that's important to study, and what does it tell us about ourselves?
I don't know if it's important to study. I mean, we got into it because it's actually an interesting question. So, I mean, everybody wants to know where their personality comes from, and we do too. And so it's obviously interesting to us because we're interested in the personality side of things. I think it's interesting to people, as you see, because everybody experiences it. So either you're a singleton and you don't have siblings, or you're born into a family with siblings and you're automatically aware of that. As we just saw, we fight with our brothers and sisters a lot. And so it becomes a focal point for all of us when it comes to how we define ourselves and how we think of ourselves, and then that often gets, let's say, translated into how we see personality developing.
And you mentioned that there have been so many studies already about this. What have they told us? What have those past studies said?
Well, when it comes to personality, the studies are surprisingly mixed. So if you look at some of the original studies, they seem to indicate some of the differences that you've already noted, that firstborns are more conscientious and more dominant, and latter-borns are more rebellious and the like. But then if you watch the literature, at least the scientific literature, as it proceeds over the last few decades, the effects become smaller and smaller. And so you don't see that necessarily noted or highlighted in most of the reports because it's probably not as popular as you might suspect, as saying that there are differences.
Sure.
And so we weren't necessarily surprised by our findings because if you look at the scientific literature, the better done studies tended to have smaller and smaller effects as we went along.
Okay.
And so this is just kind of simply the last study and the largest in a series that pretty much shows that birth order is not a significant issue for at least personality and personality development.
All right, and we're going to dig into